My name is Dia Rowan, and on the day of my sister's wedding, I stood at the edge of a ballroom I had branded from scratch, wearing a dress I'd spent too much on, and smiling at a staff member who couldn't find my name. Rowan, I repeated gently. Delia Rowan, I'm the bride's sister. The man frowned at his iPad. Sorry, ma'am, you're not on the guest list. That moment was not an oversight. It was a message, one that had taken years to write. I turned, scanning the grand hallway of the Hallbridge country estate. My mother, Margot, stood just inside the reception doors. Elegant as ever in her custom navy gown, her expression barely shifted when she saw me. Mom! I called out, still clinging to civility. They can't find my name. She walked over slowly, glancing toward the staff member as if he'd inconvenienced her. Then she looked at me without warmth, without apology. Did you really think you were invited? She asked quietly. You're not family, Dia. You're the vendor. You've done your part. No screaming, no theatrics. Just that I felt something give way in my chest. Not break, just release, then I'll live like a vendor, I said calmly. Unpaid. Of course, I turned and walked out past the marble columns, past the bar carrying menus. I designed, past the photo wall where my monogram shimmered in gold foil. The air outside was heavy with summer, the kind that sticks to your skin. My heels clicked softly across the stone as I walked toward the parking lot. Each step was painful and somehow necessary. You don't get downed in a single moment. It happens gradually until one day they stop pretending you ever belonged. And in that moment, I stopped pretending too. Growing up, I always knew Sienna was the center of our household. She was the firstborn, the louder one, the girl who sparkled in every room she walked into. My mother Margot had a way of turning her admiration into a spotlight, and once that beam landed on Sienna, it never moved. I didn't resent her for it. Back then, I just assumed that was how families worked. Some people shone, others stayed in the wings. My father, Daniel Rowan, used to be the only one who saw me clearly. He was a high school art teacher, quiet, steady, with paint under his nails and poetry in his pockets. He was the one who framed my first sketch and hung it beside his bookshelf when he passed from a stroke while coaching a student workshop. I was 13. Sienna was 16, and suddenly the center of the household became the only person my mother looked at all. I remember that year vividly. Mom started dressing Sienna up for Mother Otter luncheons at the country club, weekends at the spa, real estate office parties where she'd introduce her as her future business partner. I meanwhile spent weekends in my bedroom sketching what I couldn't say out loud. I didn't rebel. I didn't scream. I studied. I worked. I got into the Portland College of Design on scholarship, and while Margot clapped politely, she asked just one question. Is there any money in it? When I graduated, I took an entry-level job at a boutique design firm in Portland and worked my way up to lead branding projects. I didn't expect a parade, but I still called home every Sunday. I still showed up every Christmas. And each time Margot would smile thinly and pivot the conversation to Sienna, her job, her boyfriend, her hair. When I got promoted to creative lead at 30, Mom's reply was, "Oh, by the way, Sienna's thinking of buying a second condo in Scottsdale." When Sienna got engaged to Andrew Hallbridge, it was the announcement that turned Margot into a different species of person. Suddenly she was practicing how she'd introduce herself at the wedding, mother of the bride. Yes, that Hallbridge family, she started curating guest lists like she was editing royalty, and I foolishly offered to help. "You're good at the design stuff," Sienna said, waving one hand vaguely during a family brunch. "Maybe you could do the invites and menus and whatever." Whatever, that's what my time, skill, and effort had always been, whatever. Still, I agreed, because maybe if I created something beautiful enough, thoughtful enough, elegant enough, they'd see me not as the person they'd half tolerated, but as the daughter and sister they'd somehow overlooked. I started with the invitations. Classic serif fonts with hand-drawn vine flourishes, delicate blush envelopes with custom liners, wax seals pressed with the Hallbridge crest I designed from scratch. I sourced heavyweight cardstock from a print vendor I trusted, and covered the cost myself to keep it perfect from there. It spread welcome signs, seating charts, table numbers, cocktail napkins, signage for the dessert bar, illustrated maps for the guests. All of it fell into my lap with phrases like, "Could you just add this one more thing? I don't like the font anymore. Can we change it? Mom says the silver border makes it look cheap." I revised. I adjusted. I swallowed my pride and kept designing when the budget ran low. Margot whispered during dinner, "Maybe you could just take care of the rest as a gift. It's not like you're contributing to the registry." I nodded, because that's what the daughter in the background does. She keeps giving, hoping someone finally turns to look. The wedding had a website? Of course, it was pristine, minimalist, modern, and naturally designed by me one evening while updating the RSVP links and adding hotel recommendations. I clicked over to the family section out of habit. There it was, bride Sienna, Rowan, mother of the bride, Margot, Rowan, father of the groom, Charles Halbridge, mother of the groom, Nancy Halbridge. My name was nowhere, not even a passing mention. I sat in silence for a long moment, the cursor blinking back at me like a taunt. At first, I told myself it was just an oversight, an easy fix. Sienna, I texted later that night, noticed I'm not listed on the family page. Want me to add that in? She responded an hour later. Oops, must have slipped through, you can if you want. Doesn't really matter though, everyone knows who you are, that was the first crack. Weeks passed, I received no invitation in the mail, but I wasn't alarmed. I was the one who ordered the invitations, managed the addresses, even hand-delivered a few to VIP guests. I assumed I was obviously included, until the RSVPs began rolling in. Every day brought screenshots from Sienna. Look who's coming, Andrew's dad's law partner. RSVP'd, yes. Yet, no one ever asked for my reply, just to be sure I brought it up during a call with Margot. I know it's silly, I said lightly, but I never actually got my own invitation. I was hoping to save one as a keepsake. There was a long pause. Oh, Margot said. Well, Sienna probably figured you didn't need one. You're already helping so much. That explanation should have reassured me. Instead, it made my chest tighten. You're technically family, Sienna would say later when I brought it up. You don't need the formalities, technically, as if I were a second cousin, a step relative, someone with an asterisk. Next to her name still, I pushed forward. The ceremony was in late June, and by early May, I was finalizing the seating chart Sienna had sent over the final guest list, and I was adjusting names, double-checking spellings, and organizing tables by relationship clusters. It wasn't until I hit table 11, the immediate family table, that I noticed I wasn't seated anywhere, not at table 11, not at the bridal party tables. Not even among the out-of-towners. I searched the spreadsheet again. My name appeared. My hands went cold. I texted Sienna right away. Hey, just noticed, my name's not on the seating chart. Where am I sitting? She responded, 2 hours later. Oh, I figured you'd be helping with setup and coordination. Didn't think you'd need a seat. I'm not the planner, I replied. You hired Vanessa for that. I've only handled the design right, she answered. I'll figure something out. Maybe you can sit with my college friends the next day. I bought a dress. It was emerald green understated and matched the event colors without overlapping with the bridesmaid palette. It cost more than I could afford, but I wanted to blend in, not stand out. I wanted to belong, at least visually, if not emotionally. I also found a wedding gift, a vintage silver photo frame from the 1930s with soft floral engravings. I had it professionally polished, then engraved with Sienna and Andrew's names and wedding date. I planned to insert a photo of them later. Assuming I got one on the surface, I looked like any devoted sister preparing for her siblings' big day. But underneath, I was walking a tightrope between hope and humiliation. I told myself this was just wedding stress, that I was overthinking that they'd never actually exclude me, not when I'd given so much. Not when my fingerprints were on every part of their wedding. Right, the morning of the wedding arrived with a kind of tense stillness, like the air before a summer storm. I woke before my alarm, dressed deliberately, and packed my tote. Extra programs, a backup USB with signage files, Superloo floral pins, stain remover, and aspirin. The kind of kit a professional would carry. The kind I had carried dozens of times for clients. Only, this time the client was my sister and I was doing it for free. I arrived at the Halbridge Country Estate 3 hours early. The venue was grand arched stone walls, tall windows, sprawling grounds manicured to surgical precision. I parked far in the lot just as staffers were unloading floral arrangements from box trucks. The air smelled like lavender and heat inside. I approached the reception desk with a smile. Hi, I'm Delea. Rowan Bride's sister. I've been handling the design elements. Just want to check in before guests arrive. The woman with the clipboard blinked at me. Her name tag read, Vanessa Event Manager. Oh, right, she said after a beat. I thought you were working remotely? Sienna didn't mention you'd be on site. I hesitated. I'm not part of the coordination team. Just wanted to make sure signage is properly placed. Table numbers, menus. Welcome board. Those things got it, Vanessa said, flipping through her notes. Those are already set, but I'm sure you're welcome to double check. I nodded and stepped toward the grand ballroom. The welcome sign I'd hand-lettered stood by the entrance framed in eucalyptus. My monogrammed cocktail napkins sat in glass trays at the bar. My illustrated map was propped on an easel near the gift table. It should have made me proud. Instead, it made me feel exposed, like I'd carved pieces of myself into this space, and now stood invisible beside them. Upstairs, Sienna and her bridesmaids were getting ready. I climbed the marble steps and knocked softly on the suite door. It opened to a blast of laughter and music and one of Sienna's college friends blinking at me in confusion. "Oh, Delia, right." I nodded, just checking if Sienna needs anything. Before she could answer, Margot appeared behind her, shutting the door halfway. "Delia, what are you doing up here?" "I came to help. Thought maybe everything's under control," she said tightly. Sighs with her bridal party. She doesn't need any distractions right now. "Can I just say hello?" Margot's lips thinned. "She's very stressed. Maybe go downstairs, check on the table arrangements." I nodded. The words caught in my throat as I turned to leave. I heard Sienna's voice rise behind the door. "Is she gone? I don't want any drama today." The door clicked shut before I could move. I walked back down the staircase slowly, each step heavier than the last, back in the ballroom. I scanned the room. Everything was flawless. The linen napkins were folded just as I'd requested. The menu stood upright in their gold holders. The bar signs matched the dessert table theme. Every detail had passed through my hands, but I wasn't welcome to stay and witness it. Still, I sat quietly in the back row of the ceremony garden. No one asked me why I wasn't sitting with the family. Watched Sienna walk down the aisle on Margot's arm. Radiant in designer lace, I saw Margot cry, something she had never done for any of my graduation shows or promotions. The photos afterward were taken on the terrace Sienna. Andrew, both sets of parents, extended family friends, all smiling. I stood near the hedges, waiting to be waved over the wave. Never came as the cocktail hour wound down. Guests began lining up for the reception. Vanessa and her team stood at the ballroom entrance with iPads in hand. I stepped into line, smoothing my dress. I practiced my explanation silently. "I'm Delia, the bride's sister." "This is just a mix-up." When it was my turn, I gave my name. The staffer hesitated, tapped the screen. Then again, I don't see what was the last name. "Rowan. Rowen Delia." "Just a moment," he murmured. He stepped aside and whispered to Vanessa. She glanced toward me, then back at her screen. A moment later, she approached. "There seems to be a mix-up," she said with forced calm. "Your name isn't on the approved guest list." I blinked. "That can't be right. I'm Sienna's sister." Vanessa lowered her voice, "I understand, but I can only allow guests listed by the bride and mother of the bride," as if Margot appeared behind her. "What's going on?" they say. "I'm not on the list," I said, heart pounding. "I'm your daughter." "I designed everything." Margot didn't flinch. "Did you really think you were invited?" Her voice was smooth, not cruel, just final. "You're not family, Delia. You're the vendor. You've done your part." I stood there for a long second, numb, and then I nodded. "Well," I said softly, "then I'll live like a vendor, unpaid of course." I turned and walked away. No shouting, no tears. Just the sound of my heels on polished marble and the weight of 1,000 quiet rejections finally adding up to one answer. The parking lot was nearly empty. When I got outside, guests were still arriving in clusters. Laughing, dressed in silk and linen and champagne-colored heels, I walked across the stone path with careful steps. Each one louder than it should have been in the still summer air. Halfway to my car, the weight of it all caught up with me. My legs stopped moving. My hands trembled. The emerald dress I had so carefully picked now felt like a costume I'd worn to a show where I wasn't welcome. I spotted a bench tucked near a small fountain and sat down, legs folded back. Straight, still trying to look composed. Even alone, I didn't cry. I just stared at the cascading water, waiting for the numbness to wear off. It didn't. Instead, I did the one thing I could. I pulled out my phone and called the only person who had never made me feel small. "Kendra," my voice cracked. "Can you come get me?" 35 minutes later, her car pulled up. She didn't ask questions at first. Just hugged me so tight I could feel my rib shift. She slid the passenger door open, helped me in, and handed me a bottle of cold water, like it was medicine. "They didn't let me in," I whispered. She nodded. "I figured the minute you called, I knew it wasn't something small." Back at her apartment, I sat curled up on her couch. The green dress folded beside me, like discarded skin. She made me tea and didn't push. Later that night, after the shock gave way to silence, she said, "Delia, you need to talk to someone, a real someone, not just me." "A therapist?" I asked dryly. "A lifeline," she corrected. "This wasn't just about a wedding. This was your whole life finally screaming in your face." She wasn't wrong. The next week, I found myself across from a woman named Dr. Yvonne Ritter. Her office was warm, framed with soft art and low shelves stacked with books. She looked at me without blinking, but not without care. I told her everything about the invitations, the missing chair, the door that closed in my face. She didn't flinch. "What you've described," she said gently, "isn't just family favoritism. It's systemic emotional exclusion and what you experienced at the wedding. That was the culmination of years of erasure. That word, eraser, landed heavy. I wasn't just overlooked. I had been actively made invisible in one of our early sessions. Dr. Ritter gave me an assignment. She asked me to go through my old belongings, anything from childhood, and see what stood out now that the curtain had been pulled back that night. I found a small shoebox labeled in my father's handwriting. Age 113 inside were old birthday cards, crumpled sketches, and one folded letter on lined paper. It was from him. I had won a statewide poster contest in 6th grade, something no one in my family ever mentioned again after his funeral. But he had written a letter that day, Delia. I hope you always draw what you feel. That's the kind of bravery most people never find. You don't need an audience to be worth something you already are. I read it 5 times. Then I pressed it to my chest, and for the first time since the wedding, I let the tears come. 3 weeks after the wedding, I registered my design studio under my own name, Delia Rowan Design. No launch party, no social media blast, just quiet ownership of the work. I'd always done for others. One afternoon, I got an email from a wedding magazine editor. She'd seen photos from the Hallbridge event and wanted to feature the designer. My name hadn't been on the guest list, but now it would appear in print. In 14-point serif, credited for the aesthetic everyone admired. A few days later that a new bride reached out. I saw what you created, she wrote. It felt intentional. She hired me for her vineyard wedding, paid in full, no haggling, no family strings attached. When the contract came through, I noticed the venue Hallbridge Country Estate. I didn't hesitate. I signed. They hadn't wanted me there as a sister. But now I'd return as someone they couldn't ignore, not to make a point, just to do my job because I no longer needed their approval. I already had my place, and it wasn't in their ballroom.